It is 7:01. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Declaration of a quorum, 7 members present. Welcome to this meeting of the College Station Independent School District Board of Trustees. We were elected at large to represent the interests of our community and our state in educating our students. Our mission for our students in this district is success each life, each day, each hour. We adhere to all pertinent laws, policies, and procedures in posting agendas and conducting our meetings. The detailed agenda information was made available to us at least 72 hours in advance, and we have all come to this meeting informed and prepared. We have not done this meeting of the 7 trustees in a public setting rather than a public meeting. As such, public comment is included on the agenda at a specific time and requires us to listen rather than take action so as to abide by the Open Meetings Act. We are pleased that you have taken time this evening to join us. We are very proud of this school district, and we thank you for your interest and in support of our students. Recognitions. At this time, we'll move to Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Martindale, will you lead us in that?
Yes, sir. Mr. Glenn Winkle is going to lead us in our pledges as well as our moment of silence. He did an excellent job last month with this during our closure, so he gets round 2.
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one indivisible. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. We will move to item D, consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda include E2, E3, G, I2, J4, J5, J6, J7, J8, J9, J10, J11, J12, and J13. Would anybody like to have one of these items pulled from the consent agenda?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Mr. Nugent, second by Ms. Nolan. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 No nays. Motion carries 7-0. At this point, we'll move to item E1. Any type of board reports that we would have?
I actually do just a quick one for Head Start, because obviously Head Start the committee doesn't meet during the summer, but they're still busy and at work, so I thought I'd give a little update. They're busy working on their enrollment. The early Head Start is a full year enrollment, so they're still fully enrolled, and they are working on filling the Head Start, which is looking pretty good. With their acceptances, the one that's a little behind is the pre-K. I think they're probably not surprised. Some parents maybe still waiting to decide on that. But then the other good news that they reported is that they were able to get $255,000 in federal funds and CARES funds that they are directly spending, and they've already putting it to use for 2 purposes. One is some outdoor expenses, things like big shade covers, and some more tables outside, so they can do some classrooms outside. So that's nice. And the other is they're getting some more iPads and technology for some of their families and students. So that was some good news that I wanted to share.
Thank you, Ms. McAdams. Mr. Superintendent.
upcoming events. So how long do I have this evening? Outside of COVID, which we have a report on preparations for back to school and those types of things, just a few dates to note. The 23rd, which is Thursday, is the day that a number of our principals return on contract. Our intermediate school and elementary school principals come back on contract, as well as our assistant principals. Now, I say that's when they come back on contract. However, they have been working preparing for next year already. But that's a big day with those folks returning to site on Thursday. Next week, the 28th and 29th, we're going to have our Summer Administrative Leadership Institute, which typically occurs the 1st of June. But for obvious reasons, we punted on that, and we weren't sure we were even going to be able to do it, but we're going to follow through with that. We're going to change the layout. It's typically when all of our administrators come together and we work through some leadership type activities and just camaraderie, and come and work and plan for the next school year. We're going to have those activities over the course of 2 days next week, but we're breaking them into smaller chunks of time, 2 to 3 hours, and dividing our group of administrators into smaller groups. But I thought it was important that we come together as a person in groups of 15 to 18, as opposed to 80 all at once, so that we can spend some time together and just have dialogue as we prepare for the upcoming school year, and also attempt just for us to share different ideas with each other and explore different thoughts. NTU, New Teacher University, will start on the week of August the 3rd. Most of those with our New Teacher University will be handled as campus level days. We're making a little bit of adjustment for obvious reasons. We will have a district level day that is staff development, where we're going to handle that virtually. Currently, we have approximately 110 new teachers. 0 year of that number, I think, is right around 20 or 25. And of course, we have around 1,000 teachers on our staff. So August the 10th, our 187-day contract employees, which are our teachers and our instructional paraprofessionals, and those folks report back to work. And we are slated for school on Thursday, August the 13th. Whether virtual or in person, we're scheduled for in person with a virtual option at this point in time. So we are planning accordingly. So just a few things coming up in the next 3 or 4 weeks as we get situated for next school year.
We look towards hearing some more shortly. We will move to item F, hearing of citizens. Ms. Warren, is there any cards? Mike, is this what I read? During this time, public comments are welcome on non-agenda items. The board will listen, but the Open Meetings Act prevents us from responding to speakers. Please complete the note card and give it to the executive assistant. The public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Those needing an interpreter may have up to 6 minutes. Each person has the opportunity at the microphone, regardless of minutes used. Unused minutes may not be accrued by another speaker. The executive assistant will time the comments and alert the president when time has expired. The board asks that those addressing the board refrain from derogatory comments. We have a card, Ms. Aldrich.
Mic test 1, 2.
Right here, Ms. Aldridge.
Howdy, y'all. I've had several parents talking to me about this issue, and I believe y'all all received my question, but they're saying, are people even talking about it? So I thought I'd come ask it publicly. As one of the original supervisors of the After School Kids Club when College Station Parks and Recreation had it under its purview, I was wondering if the board has any plans or looked at what the options are to consider how it's going to continue existing after-school programs in light of our state legislators already saying they aren't going to be able to provide any funding for those types of programs. because of their funding issues that they're going to be facing due to COVID and the state shutdown. And so that's my question. And I'm speaking for a lot of people that really want to know, what are we going to do with our kids after school? It's a need, just like feeding some of our kids. So I'm just asking for many. I'm the mouth. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aldrich, for your passionate words. We will move to item H1. Consider approval of the 2020-2021 Student Code of Conduct. Mr. Martindale.
Each year, the board is to approve the Student Code of Conduct. There are no changes to this current one for 2021. Usually, you'll see changes to the Code of Conduct during the legislative years. So maybe this time next year, we're asking for approval. There'll be significant changes, maybe not significant, but reflective of changes in Austin. Obviously, the Student Code of Conduct is basically our standards for conduct and discipline management techniques. And I'll stop there and turn things over to our Chief Administrative Officer, Ms. Molly Perry, for additional details on this item.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Martindale. As you mentioned, this is an annual approval process. During legislative years, we typically see more significant changes to the Code of Conduct. However, this year it is very much a carry forward. Our administrative team, led by Director of Student Services, Mrs. Chrissy Hester, has reviewed the Code of Conduct with our administrators, and the version brought to you all this evening is being recommended for adoption for the 2021 school year.
Do we have any questions?
I have one question, and it's a little bit more of a philosophical one. I mean, obviously, as a parent, we get this sent to us every year. We're supposed to read through all of it and sign that, we know what everything's in there. It's a lot, though, right? There's a lot in there. And I will say on film, I do not read through it every year before I sign that, right? Although I did today. I guess my question is, how do we help particularly educate our students, but also the parents, about really what's in there when there's just so much? I mean, is there a way that we're trying to do that to our students so they know those expectations? Because I know most of our teenagers particularly are not sitting down there and reading all 46 pages of those. So.
Certainly, and you're right. There is quite a lot of information in the Code of Conduct, and the majority of which most of our students never really have to specifically concern themselves with, because it is very detailed, related to consequences of disciplinary actions and so on and so forth. But I can definitely assure you that our campus administration and our teachers are very proactive in teaching our students the behavioral expectations on their campuses, and have strategies in place to help students understand what those expectations are, and warnings and reteach prior to consequences, obviously with the exception of significant and severe behaviors.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Green, did you have a question?
Yep.
Okay. Any further questions? If not, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Code of Conduct as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Green, a second by Mr. Ben on approval of the 2020-21 Student Code of Conduct. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We're going to save about 10 minutes from tonight's meeting where we don't have to call down. Do the honor roll. We'll move to item H2, consideration and discussion related to CSISD's operational and instructional plans for the reopening of schools for the 2020 and 21 school year. Mr. Martindale, I don't think this one's gone noticed in the community, so we'll give you a few extra minutes.
Since our meeting Wednesday, where we reviewed our operational plans and instructional plans, went through some HR pieces for our employees, all of that information obviously is posted on our website and was front standing last week. Also, at that time, we began collecting emails at feedback at CSISD also, and I think probably it's probably safe to say several hundred emails through the course of that time. Since then, just questions and those types of things, which have led us to update our FAQs and think through a few other things as we put our original plan out for folks to take a look at. Also, since then, and many of you know, we sent out a survey to our families to give us an indication on whether they prefer on-site or a virtual model as we're moving into the next school year. That is due back July the 30th, and we'll use that data, and our campuses are actually using some of it now to anticipate and try to staff and build master schedules and those types of things. So those things are kind of occurring behind the scenes. In addition to that, we surveyed our teachers to get a feel for how they feel about returning. Whether on-site, we provided a choice of, we'll do whichever, and then of course the virtual option. We have tremendous amount of feedback since that point in time. And so this evening, Ms. Perry has prepared a presentation to kind of go through some of that feedback, the data we have from that. Also, an example of what may be a day of a third grader. In addition to that, scenarios as far as what's it look like if a teacher tests positive for COVID or a student in a particular class. So just some follow-up from last Wednesday and some of the things that we've heard through the course of that time, just to share with the group for feedback and questions. And with that being said, I'm going to stop and turn it over to Mrs. Perry with her presentation as we talk through these items in more detail.
All right, thank you, Mr. Martindale. Mr. President, members of the board, this evening I come to you with an update. And as Mr. Martindale has provided a great overview, I'm going to just jump on right in and start with the updates, and then we will move through the course of the presentation. I would like to preface this evening's conversation with the fact that while I am presenting the information, this has come from a team of folks who are really working very, very hard to try to make sure that we have left no stone unturned in terms of planning for this upcoming school year that is unlike any other we have ever experienced. So just since this last Friday, and yes, it is only Tuesday, we have received quite a bit of new information from the Texas Education Agency. On Friday, they released an updated public health guidance document, providing a little more detail regarding expectations in that particular area. Additionally, we have some new information regarding attendance accounting requirements, because as you all know, attendance is incredibly important for us as a school in terms of our school funding system, and how we determine whether or not our students are present in a virtual setting is certainly going to look a little different than it does when a student is in a classroom in a seat. We have also received some personal protective equipment, affectionately known as PPE, through the Texas Education Agency. So we'll look at what those numbers are in a moment as well. We also have more information regarding something called Operation Connectivity, which is TEA's moniker for the allocation of CARES funding that will be coming through the state specifically to enhance e-learning for our students in the virtual setting. We also now know that there is a fully virtual start for schools available. Certainly, we've seen a lot about that across the state in other districts, and we know that the agency, the Texas Education Agency, is now allowing districts to limit access to on-campus instruction for the first 4 weeks of school, or perhaps even beyond with a board-approved waiver. Regarding the district, we have been doing a lot of things since we met last Wednesday to share that initial unveiling of our plans. We've had ongoing collaboration, multiple phone calls with the folks at the Brazos County Health District. They've been incredible partners in this process in working through questions, not only regarding employees, but also our students, providing feedback on the plans as we've developed them and getting really in the weeds with us when we have very specific questions. And so we're very appreciative for that collaboration and relationship and know that that will be ongoing. We have also had an opportunity to visit with our principals several times last week, and we've had a lot of great conversations with them. But one thing that we will want to talk with you all this evening about is our mask policy, specifically at the elementary level. Additionally, we have done a lot of work to update our frequently asked questions documents, which are posted on the CSISD website. There's a lot of information there, not only for our virtual model, but also our on-site, and then our operational plans as well. So a lot of the updates are coming from questions that have been asked by community members, and so we do appreciate the feedback and very thoughtful questions that have been coming our way.
All right, I'm going to fill in some stuff here, Ms. Perry. Sure. The visits with the Brazos County Health Department. Actually, we had a conference call with Dr. Sullivan and Dr. Santos, Dr. Whitbeck from Bryan, a number of us yesterday afternoon. And currently what they are working on for the ISDs, for Bryan and us both, but probably I would suspect when they finish their product, it will be something that all ISDs in the county can use. But determining some indicators and thresholds to provide school districts to make decisions about closure or not. So we have been visiting with them. They are looking at what indicators to use that they think are most appropriate, and then what's the threshold of that indicator. So they're working on that for us and have been looking at what has occurred in other counties, where Travis County is a perfect example with the health department, in essence, told everyone, all the school districts in the county that you're not having on-site because of spread and the number of cases and those types of things. So they're looking at examples from various counties throughout the state, and they're crafting one to provide us to use in reference to in our decision making. So I would anticipate having that in hand. I would hope the end of the week, maybe the first of next week. But we're excited that they're taking the time to do that for us and identify some indicators and a threshold for us to use to make the best decisions. Discussions with principals. We had several calls through the course of last week, and actually we'll have a number the rest of this week, just discussing the various protocol, what that looks like at their campus, what questions are they getting from their teachers, those types of things. One thing that did come up with the elementary principals, previously in our protocol, we were requiring masks 4th grade and up. And basically, we were using the governor's definition and protocol for mandating masks through the executive order. Feedback from the principals was asking if we could not just require masks for everyone. Their conversation with me was, it's great that it's at 4th grade, but what about all the others? Then really a majority of the building, there are no masks. And it would make our teachers feel more comfortable in those types of things. And they understand that it'll take some work in kind of training the little ones and working with them as far as handling the mask. But they requested that we revisit and revise that. And I support their suggestion on that. And as Molly progresses forward in her definition of close contact, and those types of things, you will see that the use of a mask, of which I'm not wearing mine right now, but I'll put it back on shortly. The use of a mask is a huge mitigating tool. And so I think the use of masks all the way in all grade levels at the elementary will help us in case there would be a positive case, mitigate the impact on the others in the building and classroom. The updated FAQs, those were done today, and they are marked or date stamped so that you can see when they were last updated. So they'll say July 21st, so that folks can see what's occurring there. The campuses have taken our district level protocols that we shared last week, and they're going through and they're saying, okay, how does this look in the morning at our school? How does this look at lunch? How do our hallways look? How does dismissal look? And those types of things. So they're having conversation and in the process of crafting up those big pieces: arrival, dismissal, lunches, transitions. At the elementary, it'd be recess. Those types of things. They're taking a district level protocol and applying that to more specific setting relative to their facilities. So they're working on that, even those that have not returned on contract. And a big piece, this huge lifting right now, we knew it would be, but in particular at our secondary schools and our high schools, is really revamping our master schedules to meet the needs of the virtual request and the on-site request. And those are, we have good folks that do wonderful jobs with master schedules, but there's lots of conversation and brainstorming about how to manage that, because that is, this once again is a new opportunity for public schools. So just filling in some information on those updates and bullets that Ms. Perry was sharing with us. So thank you, Ms. Perry.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. So every time that the FAQ documents are updated, can y'all all hear me? Okay. Every time those are updated, are you going to put the date of when they were updated so it's easy for people to scroll through?
That was
the
a
plan?
great question, because that was my question.
Yes, so the updates that are there from today, you'll see
Yeah, I already
July
saw that.
21st, and we'll continue to do that as we make changes.
Awesome. Makes it so much easier to find the new ones.
Absolutely.
Right, because as that obviously is going to become more comprehensive over time. So yes, we'll date stamp it so people can see what's been added since the last time they may have looked at it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I actually ask one thing on here before you move on as well? First, to say I'm so glad to hear you're meeting with the health district. I think we, at least I certainly welcome their input and guidance on this. So that's great news. And I just want to clarify, you did kind of indicate that it sounds like from your discussion, do you think they'll be making the decisions, or they'll be just kind of offering us the information and some guidance for
I do not anticipate them, and Ms. McAdams, this is me assuming on a Zoom call, so I do not want to speak on behalf of the health department. I don't know that they would issue a strong stand like Travis County. I think they'll give us a threshold at which point they would recommend that we close schools, but I don't know that they would say you have to. But at this particular threshold, we would recommend you to do so. I would be inclined to follow whatever recommendations they articulate to us. But I did not get the impression that they would. I think they'll provide us the information to reference and then allow us that judgment.
Great, thank you. And again, thanks for having those conversations. Yeah.
And I can't speak enough to Bob Lampkin also is one of the folks, and really the one I say in touch with the most at the health department. Dr. Santos and Dr. Sullivan, of which you all know Dr. Sullivan, were a part of that call as well. And again, Dr. Whitbeck, because what we were hoping is they would craft one that all school districts in the county could utilize as a resource, because Brian is looking for the same instrument as we are.
All right. So as you all can see, in the short course of 1 week, the situation is continuing to unfold. And of course, we will continue to keep you all updated as we proceed through these circumstances. I alluded to the PPE allocation, and this chart indicates those items that have been allocated through the Texas Education Agency. CSISD has purchased additional supplies, but we wanted to provide you all with the numbers regarding masks, both disposable and reusable, gloves, thermometers, hand sanitizers in gallons, and those face shields that we have begun to receive through that state level allocation. Of course.
Sorry, may I ask one more question, a quick question on that one?
Yes, ma'am.
Another question that's been coming up on kind of PPE is more the desk shields, like the plexiglass type or plastic one. Is that something that we're also looking at using and for either teachers or students?
So we have installed the plexiglass in those high traffic areas, like at secretaries who are receptionists at the front. We actually had this conversation with the Brazos County Health Department this afternoon because we have been looking at different possible resources to purchase, especially for our youngest learners in pre-K Head Start who would not necessarily be required to wear masks. And they indicated because there is so much movement throughout the classroom in the day, that really was not going to provide the mitigation risk that we might hope that it would. And so they did not recommend the purchase of those movable plexiglass shields for desks.
For desks, for the students or for the teachers either? Or?
They did not. They said that because there is so much movement within classrooms and throughout the building, that really it was not going to provide the protection that one might hope.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
On the disposable masks, are the students expected to bring their own and then we will, if they can't or don't, then we'll provide that? Or what is the guidance around that? Sorry, I'm
Sure.
my bad.
The disposable masks will be available for those students who do not have their own. We anticipate because there is a statewide order for 10 and up that many of our students will have their own and probably prefer to bring their own for what is comfortable.
Okay, thanks.
So in addition to PPE, we know that there will be a need for enhanced access to technology. And while we do have a large number of devices available across the district now, we know that when students are in school, we'll have a need both for students to have those devices for learning in the classroom, but also those students who do not have access at home. We did conduct a survey, as you'll recall, earlier in July, and we found that the vast majority of our students responded that they did have adequate access, even knowing that the virtual learning option would be enhanced and you would need a device that is greater than what you might be able to just do on a telephone or even a tablet for the older grades. So we have fortunately had a number of funding streams that we can access different devices from, one of which is the Operation Connectivity that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And so what you're seeing are numbers of devices from those different combined funding streams that have already been purchased and those that are pending purchase. And so know that you can expect to see some requests for approval on those purchases that are greater than $50,000 at an upcoming meeting, because we do anticipate that we'll be able to put in a purchase order quickly. The state has engaged in a process to obtain a large bulk order. So even though you've probably heard in the media that it's very hard to get devices right now, which is absolutely true, we are fortunate to have the Texas Education Agency leverage that large bulk purchase to help us access some devices more quickly. And so a number of those laptops and iPads and all of the hotspots would be through that large bulk purchase with the state.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to keep it. I have just another one on here on the hotspots. How are we using those? And did we use those in the spring were they with families or for teachers? Or
we did have some hotspots, and primarily we distributed those to teachers who did not have internet access at home because teachers were working out of their homes during the closure in the spring. Now, for this coming year, the additional hotspots are expected to be used for students who do not have access in their home environment. We will also turn back on that extended Wi-Fi that it goes way out into the parking lots, and we'll even add a few more locations for that as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
So as you all know, we have engaged our community in several surveys. Our families, we have asked to begin making commitments for the instructional model, virtual or on-site. And for our staff, we have asked information regarding their preference for teaching instructional models, as well as whether or not they would like to discuss any particular concerns with human resources regarding medical needs that might place them at higher risk for comorbidities with COVID-19. And so please know that both of these surveys are still in progress. And so the information you see, while is a large representative sample, it is not complete at this time. So we'll start with our instructional model selection. And if you'll recall, our earlier survey to just gauge interest was really by family. We didn't require individual responses. This survey is specific to each individual child. And so as the family fills that out, they would indicate the name, the date of birth, their selection choice, so that we can really begin to track exactly who is going to be in which model. As of late this afternoon, we had 4,184 individual responses received on this particular commitment survey, and that would represent just about 30% of what we would expect our total population to be, with an anticipated enrollment of about 14,000 students. And so for a survey, for those of you that are familiar with survey metrics, 30% is a great sample, but we need 100%. Because we want to know how to best plan for our students and to be able to staff accordingly. And so while our families do have until July 30th to respond, we would encourage folks, as soon as they feel comfortable, to go ahead and let us know, because that will really, really help us with those things we talked about earlier regarding master scheduling.
And our principals, our campus level administration have access to these responses by individual. So as responses are provided, whether in the instructional model or the staff survey, which Ms. Perry is fixing to share, then they can see names and kind of gives them an indication of how to start working with that individual response as we plan for on-site or virtual and those types of things. So they're getting that information real time as it's submitted.
Yes. So as you can see, we've got just a little over 30%, and that has remained fairly stable over the last several days, that have responded that they intend for their students to engage in the virtual model at home, and almost 69% in the on-site. We will be sending reminders to our families as we roll out additional information, and really want to encourage folks to respond and help us to best plan for the upcoming school year.
And I assume at some point, at some level in the district, we'll start contacting families individually who haven't responded?
Absolutely. If we're not getting a response after several more widespread reminders, then those campuses will start engaging in phone calls because they absolutely are very interested to know these choices as well. Ultimately, if we're not able to engage a family and make that contact, then we would assume that they will be attending on site after that deadline of the 30th. And that was part of our original communication.
And have y'all got any feedback from the campus level as far as if that 13-day period between July 30th and the first day of school, if they anticipate having time to do that, or?
I can answer that one, Mr. Ben. No, not really. We have engaged the campus, and I can answer you. It's really not, it is a very heavy lift. However, TEA set that marker for us where you had to provide that choice up to 2 weeks prior to the first day of instruction. And I guess I can go on record with this. It doesn't really bother me. I think that's a poor direction by TEA. To me, while we want to provide families as much time as possible, what it tells me is the folks who make that decision at TEA have never built a master schedule. So it is a challenge of which our people are up to, but that is a huge task of which typically a master schedule is built through the course of a summer. So that's why I mentioned earlier, I think it's important that our principals are getting real time on this, because as a response comes in, it allows them, in essence, to kind of pull that student schedule and just start maybe managing those as they receive them individually. But you have to see the collective picture as well, because that influences how you position your staff to manage those requests. So yes, sir, it is a not challenging, it's an opportunity. The turnaround, the timeline is absolutely an opportunity for all school districts.
All right. So the information you're seeing here is an aggregate of all responses district-wide, and you might be wondering if those trends are similar across the various levels. And so here you can see that same information broken apart by high school, middle school, intermediate, and elementary. And while the high school number is slightly smaller for those that are opting into the virtual model, overall, that is a very tight percentage around that 30% mark. So we're really not seeing significant variance across levels in terms of how our families are making these selections for their students. Mentioned earlier that we sent a survey to all staff, and we are absolutely considering that information regarding all staff. However, our teachers' instructional preference is especially important in this particular process because of what Mr. Martindale mentioned regarding the need to look at how we're going to utilize our capacity of staff and meet those needs of family selection. So you can see here so far of our teachers, we've had 664 responses, which is a much higher response rate than the percentage of students at this point. And of those, 17% have indicated that their first preference is virtual. 23.6% have said, put me where you need me. I really don't have a preference, whereas almost 60% do prefer as their first choice the on-site model. We are then looking for particularly those virtual preferences to see who might have a medical condition first for themselves and then perhaps for their family to look at accommodation in terms of their assignment for virtual versus on-site. While we do anticipate that all of our teachers will be instructing students on campus, a teacher in the virtual model would certainly have much less contact throughout the day if they do not have students in and out of their classroom. And so please know that we're very much working to accommodate those requests as best we can.
And
So this is about a 70%,
yeah, two-thirds.
two-thirds.
664,000 teachers, about two-thirds. And this survey is active through the end of the day tomorrow.
That's right. So when we met last week, one of the questions that came up was, what is a day going to really look like for, say, a third grade student in College Station ISD? Obviously, instructionally, the TEKS are the same. Teachers will be in the building. But if you're going to be in the on-site model, there's certainly going to be some differences, and definitely if you're in the virtual model. And so we've pulled together a side-by-side in the day of a third grade student. Of course, we've made some assumptions along the way regarding bus ridership and things of that nature, but we'll walk through the on-site, and then we'll look at how that compares to the virtual environment. So all of our students who are attending on site will have a health screening of their student before they leave home. That is something, just like employees, we are expecting of parents. That will be part of our communication to our families as we return to school regarding the various components that you'll find in our mitigation plan online in terms of checking temperature and looking for symptoms that are abnormal for that particular individual that might be indicative of COVID-19. If a student's riding the bus, then before they enter the bus, they would need to put on their mask. As soon as they step up the stairs, there will be hand sanitizer available to use right as they get on. And then depending on route and ridership, we will be socially distancing the children on the bus as much as possible. When students arrive, depending on how they are getting to school, similar to our current situation, they will enter the building through a door designated for their particular mode of transportation. And so for a student entering on the bus, they would come right in the door there. And if they are eating in the cafeteria for breakfast, then they would have a location that they know to go for maximized social distancing, or perhaps to a designated waiting area for the first bell or time to transition to class. The only time that the mask would be removed during this process would be during the seated time in the cafeteria while they're eating. In the classroom, students will be coming in. We're going to try to minimize the touchless entry so we don't have lots of people touching the doors as we're coming in and out. They would again have an opportunity to either wash their hands or sanitize. And of course, we're going to try to maximize that distancing in the classroom as much as possible. And the mask would be worn throughout the classroom time for all of the various activities. Something that will look a little different this year in our classrooms are the reduction of shared supplies. So we will look at assigning students their set of supplies so that we don't have that cross contact. For those things that are shared, like classroom sets of iPads, we have procedures in place for sanitation, and all of our classrooms will have a fine mist sanitizing spray that will be refilled by the custodial staff that is safe for desks and technology, so long as we're not overly excessive in the spray. During transitions, again, our students will wear masks. Elementary, we already have great procedures in place for walking in line, so we'll just increase the spacing there. And during those class-wide restroom breaks, the teacher will be monitoring for the distancing as well as proper hand washing. So far during this day, you can see on the right, our virtual students would have a little more flexibility. So that student would have a designated wake-up time based on the family's preference. And, we, of course, encourage a breakfast so that they're ready to work. They would log in to Schoology and begin their assignments. Now, students are not going to just jump right into assignments. There will be folders where students have opportunities to view engaging activities and really do more interactive work as well as the assignment piece. So parents will, of course, designate what times those are, but there would have to be engagement every day for attendance purposes. And so if a student is not engaged either through Schoology or through a phone call or some other methodology, then they would not be counted present for that particular school day. We, of course, encourage our families to provide a quiet location so our kiddos can work without too much distraction, and they would work within those Schoology folders that we shared last week to complete those assignments. They would participate and submit as needed by the teacher. And then finally, there's a lot of flexibility for our virtual learners in terms of when they switch from one folder to another. We are developing a plan that is asynchronous rather than synchronous, meaning that they could log in and access the instruction from their teacher at a time that's most convenient, or they could log in when their teacher's live, and then there would be more opportunity for the back and forth engagement. So moving on to lunch, our students at the on-site instructional model would, of course, transition again with that same procedure that they'll become very familiar with the distancing, wearing their mask, and sanitizing before and after. The process of obtaining lunch will look a little bit different because students will not be taking items off of the counter unless they are individually wrapped. And so the cafeteria workers would do that, and then the system of payment would be touchless. So for those of you that have had elementary students, you know that they touch the keypad, put their number in. That will not be part of the process this year. And again, only masks come off during the time at the table while eating. We will absolutely have recess. That's been a question that has come up a number of times, but we would assign zones to try to avoid that interaction and mixing of students from other groups, which in the process of contact tracing becomes very helpful in terms of who was in contact with whom. In the process of coming in and out, of course, we would have sanitation of hands again. And we will continue to have our camp, or our computer, art, music, and PE time for our elementary students. But again, we would reduce the cross-contamination opportunity by providing individualized supplies or sanitizing equipment, and again, sanitation in and out of the classroom. And last but certainly not least, when we dismiss, we will have procedures in place to try to minimize that contact again between groups. So students would certainly be spending more time with their classmates this year than they might have previously in terms of mixing during those transition times. Looking at the virtual model, lunch is, of course, at the discretion of the family. However, we will have opportunities for families to come and pick up lunch at designated campuses. We'll be providing more details on what that will look like in the coming weeks. Recess would, of course, again, be scheduled by the parents, or time to go outside. And enrichment activities similar to camp would be available in their online Schoology folders. And last but not least, the family would determine when the student has completed their daily assignments on that particular day. Before I move on, are there particular questions regarding the day of an elementary student that I can help answer for you all?
Is breakfast a part of this, or is it just lunch?
Yes, so during,
I missed that.
I'm sorry, do you mean for students to be able to pick up?
Yes, sorry, virtual students.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
I just want to say thank you so very much for doing this, because, you know, we can read all of those things and all the different areas, and I think you've done a great job organizing the website and whatnot. But this helps me just to be able to see what the expectations are for both on-site and the virtual, so that I can understand as a parent exactly what those expectations are going to be throughout the day. So, and from start to beginning. So this, for me, this was perfect. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to put this together.
I have to give kudos to Dr. Trammell. She worked very hard on this component
thank
of the plan.
And before you move on, are you going to do something similar for high school, or should I ask a high school question now?
We did not develop a similar matrix. The day would look very similar. Obviously, transitions are not as structured for our
Right.
secondary students, and they would have expectations taught regarding the social distancing and reinforcement during those times.
Yeah, because honestly, the high school has its own, certainly its own challenges on both sides of this, on the on-site, like you said, but also potentially for the virtual, if students are coming in for some of those extra classes, and just obviously managing that is going to be something as well. I do want to ask about a particular question about the virtual for the high school students, and you mentioned here about, you know, that daily engagement in terms of attendance that, you know, we know each student needs to have. For a third grader, it would just be once a day. I was unclear for the high school student, though, because they have multiple class periods. How is their attendance tracked? Are they having to check in 7 times a day?
That's a great question. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentations, one of the things that we received updated information on from the agency last Friday was regarding those attendance and accounting requirements. I almost hesitate to say exactly what that's going to look like because it continues to change. However, what we do know is that in order to count a student present in the virtual setting, they would have to engage, meaning we could clearly see that they had gone in and completed something in their Schoology assignment. They had participated in an online Zoom meeting. They had watched a video. We are very fortunate to be positioned with a learning management system like Schoology that will help us to track those things and make that process much more simple for our teachers.
So again, per class or per day?
It should be per class.
It really
is my
needs to be, you think it's per class?
Yeah, so
But
the students will not be able to front load and complete all of their assignments for one course at the beginning of the week. I know there was a lot of flexibility in that. I experienced that in my own home where Monday was math day and kids really enjoyed kind of having that opportunity. But because of the way that attendance and accounting will happen, those teachers are going to have to really sort of divvy out those assignments a little more slowly so that that students have an opportunity to engage every day.
And Kimberly, this is a requirement by TEA. Ultimately, our instructional plan will have to be sent to TEA for approval as an asynchronous plan. And they created the criteria, and as a matter of fact, the commissioner spoke in detail on this today, that to have your plan approved, there are certain criteria they're looking for. And to be able to account for our student engaging in each period through the course of the day and receive funding for that was a piece of that. And as Molly mentioned, we're fortunate that a few years ago we bought Schoology because at the moment it is one of two learning management systems that the state is contemplating endorsing. So from that standpoint, we were fortunate and positioned ourselves quite well, not knowing what we were all going to be going through. But in our FAQs for our virtual setting, we have a question about the attendance and what is considered engaged, and those bullet points to consider a student in attendance were taken straight from the asynchronous plan from TEA. So it gives examples, and Molly kind of alluded to it, whether it's engaging in that course folder in Schoology, which time stamps it for us, a virtual interaction, any of those types of things would count as being present.
Okay.
And attendance requirements are still in place as well, even for the virtual setting where students are required to engage 90% of the days that classes are offered. So it's much more structured, and those decisions are things that TEA are deciding and requiring if you're going to receive funding for your virtual product.
Right. And I get one other little clarification on it, and it may be on the questions on the website, is that I'm assuming, though, that they don't have to do it at, like, first period is at 8:30, and second period, that they could do it whenever on their asynchronous time they do that work on that day. Is that clear from TEA? Or?
We are moving in very much in the direction of an asynchronous plan, meaning that students could engage with flexibility. However, there may be synchronous components to that plan where if the student is going to have an opportunity to engage real time with their teacher, then they would need to log in at that same time. For example, if it's a Zoom call, they could log in, have the lesson, have opportunity for Q&A, feedback. If they were to watch that later, they would still be engaging, but there just would not be as much of an opportunity for that reciprocal interaction.
Yes, the flexibility.
So there's some flexibilities there. That's what, yes, I thought, right, they can do some live, but flexibility.
Right, that's what asynchronous provides us. If we would follow the synchronous model, it would be by the bell schedule and it would be live and segmented. There would not be flexibility in the day. And part of what we learned through the course of the spring is this possible you may have a kiddo or two and they're sharing a device, and we knew those types of things would create conflicts. The asynchronous just seemed to be more fitting for from the feedback we got through the course of the spring to fit our families to provide flexibility if they chose that model.
I think that's a great point, because the synchronous model would require a student to be engaged online for 5 or more hours per school day, whereas this really does provide a much greater level of flexibility.
Thank you. I appreciate for all that clarity. Again, I think we saw some of that in some of the questions, and I've heard from parents. Thank you.
Just to make sure that I completely understand, they do not have to check in at a given time.
Correct. Okay. Just during that school day.
Okay, got
I
it.
think he even says by 11:59 p.m.
Okay.
Just like a college class.
Okay.
And as Ms. Perry mentioned, we will post assignments daily because we have to account for them engaging in attendance each day. And if we, like through at home, and Molly mentioned, and my son was the same way, when his math teacher posted for the week on Monday, he'd sit and do it all day. When in that particular case, he would be in attendance Monday and absent Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So that's why you saw the folder structure in our instructional framework by day. Of course, we'll have the week at a glance, give everybody an indication of what's coming. But the actual lessons will be posted on a daily basis because that's how we can ensure the attendance component that's required by TEA. Just a few moving parts, not that many though.
On the classroom portion of this, one of the concerns that came out in the feedback that we received was, I think the term cheating was used, but the concern that people had in regard to assistance being received in the virtual assignments and so forth, and how that would create an inequity between the on-site kids and the virtual kids. Could you speak to that?
Yes, I can certainly see how that would be a concern for our families. I believe one of the FAQs we updated today, yes, confirming with Mr. Glenwinkle, does speak to all of the various methodologies that we are currently considering in order to mitigate the possibility of those kinds of circumstances. That ranges from things like virtual proctoring, which we used with great success for our credit by exam program this last summer, and other things that you may be familiar with, like turnitin.com, where you can run things through for plagiarism. And so the comprehensive list is on our FAQ document, and we are working with our campus administrators this week to look at the things that are being considered and make a final determination about the methodology. But ultimately, much of that will really come down to the design of the assignment and the assessment, and whether or not cheating is really possible.
I will say that this summer, my 10-year-old was one of the kiddos that got to take a proctored exam online. And y'all, she got kicked out because she reached down to pet the dog. And her face went out of the screen, out of that little area that they told her that she could be in. So we had to contact them and beg to get back in. Not beg, just tell them what happened. But I felt that was, I never had to take a proctored exam like that. And I thought it was pretty legitimate.
What's the cost associated with the virtually proctored exams?
I'd have to gather that information, but we certainly could look at that and provide you more info.
Some other items that are in the FAQ on this particular item, Mr. Ben, are time limits on the exams that are taken virtually. Set up the exam to show one question at a time. Prohibit backtracking on responses. She mentioned the software. Also adjusting the test question format so it's more open-ended as opposed to a multiple choice and those types of things. So there are, we heard that feedback as well, and it's something we've been looking at and exploring and adjusting. And so we provided that information on our FAQ update today, and I'm sure that list will even become more comprehensive as we explore resources for that.
I was going to say, like everything else, it's going to be in a constant
Yeah.
change. So
Mr. Martindale, Ms. Perry, has there been any discussion, because I hear what you're saying about, the way the test questions, are we saying that would be the same test for in-person and virtual, or are we saying?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No, I would leave that discretion to the teacher. Mm-hmm. However, if I'm providing both as an instructor, I'm probably going to have a separate exam for the virtual setting.
Okay, totally. But how about the level of complexity, right? So if they're doing the open-ended questions or that type of thing, will that experience be the same? Not actually the exact same questions where they could, share that, but the level of difficulty, I guess.
Right. The level of difficulty has to be consistent, yes.
Okay.
But you can change the structure of how you ask the question to try to eliminate the Google search on the side and those types of things because of time restrictions and those
Right.
types of things.
Has there been any discussion on, I'm just going to throw it out there, on having both on-site and virtual be open notes? And meaning, I understand that in Schoology you can time it, right? So if I'm in class, I have 45 minutes to take my test. If I'm virtual, I have 45 minutes to take my test, or it shuts off in Schoology. But both have the ability to be open note. Again, just wondering if that's been at all part of the consideration.
It has not.
Okay.
And whether the principals have had that type of conversation with teachers yet, I'm not sure. But Those would be considerations I'd defer to the classroom teacher to decide.
Okay. And I know that it's still in discussion, and when did we hope that this would be kind of ironed out amongst 3 million other things I know you're trying to iron out?
That's going to be part of our conversations with principals this week.
Okay. Okay, great.
Well, and I guess another question is that, and you might be already discussing this as well, as, I mean, at some point, these students will have to take a final exam, at least the high school and even some of the middle school students. So that part could be certainly more rigorous where there would, not be any cheating able to take place, or even possibly required inside somewhere, possibly, but at that point, anyway.
Lots of conversations to
Exactly.
be had, no doubt.
So I do have one more question about on-site. You kind of mentioned that it would be different in the middle schools and high schools, but do we have any expectations for transitions for middle school and high school? Have we talked about that
Absolutely.
yet?
And we have shared with our middle school and high school, all of our secondary principals, as well as elementary for that matter, some sample campus level plans. And so part of what we are going to continue working on this week are exactly those. And those are the kinds of conversations that may have some nuance difference depending on the facility's layout. But we'll be working across levels to finalize those campus operational plans that would include that kind of information.
Some of the examples I've seen thus far as principals have entered that information in because we have a collective spreadsheet. And so transitions and dismissals and those types of things, some of the comments I've seen principals put in as by grade level or by hallway, that type of thing, to limit how many people are out at one time. Those are just two examples as I was reading through some of their work today.
So basically, we can kind of come to the conclusion in a sense that these surveys of who's coming back on site and who's going virtual are pretty important so that we can get a plan together and these principals can get their campuses lined up and these teachers can figure out if they're doing straight on site or virtual or a mixture of both, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Just want to make sure we understood the importance of that.
Thank you, Mr. Horak. All right. And if there are not any additional questions regarding the day for our students at this point, we'll transition and talk about a few different scenarios. I know we have a lot of information on our website. We shared with you all quite a bit on our workshop meeting last week regarding the different processes and procedures. But sometimes it helps just to see in a linear fashion what happens when. And so we've developed several scenarios for you all this evening, but before we jump into those, it is very important that we gain a common understanding of this concept of close contact. So for the purposes of COVID-19 transmission, close contact is defined as being within 6 feet of an infected person for a cumulative duration of 15 minutes without face covering, or being directly exposed to infectious secretions. Say that really fast. So if someone coughs on you, they're not wearing a face covering, sneezes on you, and they are infected. Additionally, when we conduct the contact tracing, it's really important to know when that person was infectious. And while it's not an exact science, because we are continuing to learn more and more about how this virus is transmitted in the infectious period, at this point, the CDC's recommendation is that you define that as 2 days before the illness onset, if there are symptoms, or 2 days prior to a positive specimen collection, not necessarily the result, because there can be a delay there, until the patient is isolated. And so when we engage in the contact tracing process, these are very, very important understandings to be able to ask questions of that individual regarding who they've been around, whether they've been wearing a mask, whether they have directly exposed someone, and when they specifically became symptomatic or had that specimen taken that led to a lab confirmed positive. So with that, let's talk through the scenario of an employee who has COVID-19. So first and foremost, our employees are required to report that information to their supervisor. As I mentioned earlier, employees are required to self-screen. So if they are symptomatic, they should not be reporting to work. And so once that supervisor is aware, they would refer them to Human Resources, and we would engage with that person in a number of questions regarding their particular circumstances. If that person has been in our facilities within the last 3 days, then we would immediately close off any areas that they have been in and sanitize. And I know that might sound a little cumbersome, but our facilities department has an incredible plan where we will have that available on site, and we'll be able to immediately go out and do the fine mist sanitation using a hospital grade material, and it dries very quickly. So we could literally have folks in and out of a space in a span of 30 minutes from notification. So of course the employee would begin the quarantine at the onset of their symptoms or their positive test results, and Human Resources will work closely with them to, number one, determine, can you work remotely? And if not, are you eligible for emergency paid leave? As we looked at last week, under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, employees do have access to an additional 10 days, if eligible, that are not part of their state and local leave. So there is a paid leave provision for those folks that need to be in these circumstances. Our Human Resources Department would conduct the contact tracing in the workplace. So anybody that they were in close contact with within CSISD facilities, we would notify those close contacts of their need to quarantine. Again, if that individual had their mask on consistently throughout the course of their workday when they were around other individuals, then we would have very minimal need for other individuals to quarantine. We will be notifying the Brazos County Health District and then communicating to all individuals on that site. Now, of course, we do have legal requirements to not disclose confidential information about that individual, and so the whole campus would just receive a general notice regarding the confirmation of a positive case of COVID-19. The employee would not be able to return to work until they have met the criteria as outlined in the mitigation and response plan, which is linked here in the presentation or available online. It really does very much depend on whether that individual was symptomatic or asymptomatic regarding the length of time and the criteria for their return. But we would, like all extended absences, require clearance from their physician and Human Resources before they could return. With that, I'll pause before we shift into some of the additional implications. Are there specific questions on this particular slide?
This particular scenario deals with an employee who has been diagnosed with COVID.
That's right.
What about an employee who has been exposed?
Okay, and we will absolutely get to that one if you'll give me just a moment.
Thanks.
Yes.
I think we have three
Yes, we
scenarios.
have 3 scenarios for you this evening. So in this scenario, where the employee was diagnosed, as we mentioned, through the process of contact tracing, we would notify those individuals who need to quarantine. Our hope is through the wearing of masks. That would be a minimal circumstance for our individuals, but just as a reminder, those folks would need to quarantine if they were in close contact with the positive employee. So what does this all mean? If the employee was wearing their face covering appropriately and consistently, and then no other individuals would be required to quarantine in the work setting. If anyone was in contact, then again, we would notify and they would engage in the quarantine process. If they were a teacher, a substitute would instruct a class while students continued to attend on site, assuming those students were, again, wearing masks, and we were able to continue with on-site instruction as usual. We would notify, again, all individuals in the building. So let's talk about if a student has COVID-19. Process is very similar in a lot of ways. However, the reporting would need to come from the parent, and we are asking that those parents report specifically to the campus principal so that we can filter that information in one direction and make sure that all of the rest of the processes happen as designed. So the student, of course, would begin their quarantine and any sanitation that might need to happen in any area, whether that be classroom, field house, art room, whatever it is for that student would be sanitized. Instead of human resources, the school nurse will be much more involved in these particular cases. They would conduct the school-related contact tracing to help determine if there were any other individuals in the school that needed to quarantine, and they would also notify Ms. Hester, our Director of Student Services, who would in turn make sure that the Brazos County Health District is notified. We, again, on any site where a case is positive, we would notify all individuals, families, as well as staff of a lab confirmed positive. As long as the student is continuing to engage in instruction in a virtual setting while they are at home, in the quarantine process, and they are well, of course, they're medically able, then they would continue to be counted present. So that is a significant departure from attendance accounting rules in the past. And so we are grateful that our students will be able to continue learning, not only through the provision of assignments, but also for the purposes of attendance. Students would also follow those same guidelines, and the family would be communicating with the school nurse regarding the symptomology and when they are cleared by their physician to return. Just like with employees, anyone who is determined to be in close contact during that infectious period would need to quarantine for 14 days. So for students, what does this mean? If they were wearing their face covering appropriately and consistently, meaning covering their nose and their mouth, then no other individuals in the school would be required to quarantine. If anyone was in close contact, of course, we would notify them specifically, and they would. And they would not be allowed to return to on-site learning until cleared by their physician, but could continue learning and be counted present. And last but certainly not least, again, all individuals at the site would be notified of a positive case.
So that student, though, if they're quarantined, I mean, they'll still be engaging in their learning at home, but just to make sure everybody understands, they cannot come up to school, though, and participate in school sports.
Absolutely. You would not be able to come to the campus during any sort of at-home learning if you were in a 14-day quarantine period or symptomatic.
And I'm sorry if you did said this today. I think you said it last week. That student would be still working with their original, not with their original teacher. They'd be working, probably move to a virtual teacher. I think that's what.
So if a student is only going to be away from school for a few weeks, we want to minimize that disruption and would intend for that student to continue learning with their teacher, just like they would if they had to be out for a few weeks right now under previous circumstances. If a student needs to be out for an extended period, then we would look at switching them to a virtual learning setting.
All right, great.
So another question that a lot of folks have had is what happens when either an employee or a student lives with someone who has been diagnosed with COVID-19? And living with someone almost assuredly would mean close contact because I think very few of us are wearing masks consistently in our home. And so because they would be considered close contact, they would need to stay at home and self-quarantine during that period of time from exposure through the 14 days. If during that time they experience symptoms, then certainly that could potentially extend, especially if they were also diagnosed. During that isolation period, whether it's a student or staff, we are asking that folks self-monitor, including a temperature check, and letting their healthcare provider know should they begin to have symptoms, especially things like fever, cough, shortness of breath, or other mild symptoms. And certainly we recommend, in accordance with the CDC guidelines, that they avoid contact with any high-risk individuals during that period of quarantine. I'll pause before we shift into our next steps because I know scenarios was quite a bit of information to consider.
I think the scenarios were very helpful, so I like that a lot. A question on that close contact definition, which I love that you're focusing on. Is that word for word what TEA uses for their definition, or?
So TEA is basing their definition on the CDC guidelines. And so when you look at the TEA definition and you line it up with the CDC, you might see a little bit of variance in some of the specific language, but ultimately they look very, very similar in terms of the 6 feet, the cumulative duration, and direct exposure.
Yeah, the one thing that is different on the CDC's is the without a face covering. But I was wondering if, I did go look, so I think this is what TEA this is what TEA uses, right?
Yes, TEA, and this was something that we did specifically discuss with our local health department, and they were very much advocates of using the same definition regarding the face covering.
I guess I'm just surprised that it's different than what CDC says. And again, that's a bigger question than probably in here, but I am a little surprised it's different than what CDC exactly says on the face covering one, but I do, from all the data that's out there, and glad to hear the health district also says that the face coverings is making this work, right? So that's the difference here, and so we got to keep them on. Which brings me to my second question on your scenarios is, again, if we're all wearing our face masks in the classrooms, we really can keep kids hopefully in school. That's the goal. What about some of those other potential places, particularly with the high school kids, where they may be in situations where they're taking the masks off? Particularly the sports, extracurricular things, bands. Have we stepped through any of those scenarios, or are we still waiting for more from UIL on that?
We actually did receive updated guidance from UIL just this morning, and so as we shift our thinking into next steps, that is one of the areas that we were going to mention regarding considering the new guidance from UIL. We expect that probably TEA will follow shortly with the non-UIL related guidance, and so we should expect to receive more information on that in the coming week or so. All right. And with that, of course, this is very much an ongoing process. And so one of the things we are very committed to doing is continuing to provide answers to specific questions received via email at feedback@csisd.org. Of course, as you can imagine, we've received a large volume of those. And so if you have not gotten a direct response, you may find that your answer is now part of our FAQ. And so we would encourage you to check there. The collaboration will absolutely continue with the Brazos County Health Department. As Mr. Martindale mentioned, we had a conference call yesterday. Mr. Glenwinkle and I had an impromptu conference call this afternoon with several questions that we had. And so, again, I just can't thank the folks there enough for their assistance and expertise in this particular area. As we have mentioned several times throughout the presentation, that work with campus level administration is critical. This is not something that we can do here from a central level and mandate that happens. This is something that we have to work collaboratively on, and those folks are working overtime plus to make sure that we are ready to start school as smoothly as possible under the circumstances. And so those campus level operational plans and master schedules are very much next up in terms of continuing to work through and finalize. We will continue communicating with our teachers and staff. We're committed to making sure that they have the most up-to-date information and they know where they can receive information. I mentioned the survey earlier. One of the questions listed there was, would you like for your campus administrator to contact you to talk about this more? Would you like for human resources? So we are really trying to make sure our staff know where to go if they have questions and reach out and engage them as they have needs surrounding the circumstances. We'll continue adding those information and updates to our operational and instructional plans and FAQ documents. If you haven't checked those out already and you're watching online, we very much encourage you to go there because the answer to many of your questions can likely be found there already. And last but certainly not least, as we received new information that becomes effective on August 1st from the UIL this morning, we'll be examining the implications of those UIL risk mitigation updates and determining our next steps in that particular arena. And with that, Mr. Martindale and/or I would love to answer any questions that you have or consider any additional comments.
I just have a comment. I just want, again, to thank you for not only everything you've done to build the FAQs, the operational instructional plans, going through the scenarios. I think scenarios examples are some of the best ways to teach those to understand. So I really appreciate that. And I like what you said at the end, and I really want to reiterate that questions going to those FAQ documents, they are ever changing. I mean, from the last time I looked earlier today, they have changed. So I think it's really important that we get the message to the community to drive them towards that, to the website and to those documents, because I think there can be a lot of speculations and opinions and assumptions that can be made, but this is really the source of truth for everyone here in CSISD. So I just really want to encourage the community to look towards that documentation, because as we've discussed here today, you're in constant contact with the health department, going through CDC, everything, right? So anyway, I just appreciate all that you've done. I know that there will be, not every scenario can be covered ahead of time, and some decisions are going to be made on the fly. But I also like the fact that we're taking a lot of feedback, we're hearing it, we're listening to it, and we're including that on the FAQs. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Ms. Green. I appreciate you saying that. And it also triggered me to think about other information on the website. And one of those things is the link to that survey. So if you were thinking, I didn't get that email, first of all, check your spam folder, because sometimes they have a tendency to land there. But two, the link is available on the website. And so parents can go there and access directly the survey to choose the instructional model for their family and each of their children.
And I'll just add, especially since I do ask a lot of those questions, I certainly appreciate all the information that's been provided, and this adapting to all the questions from us and from the community, and being able to just address that and provide so much information so that our families can make the right choice for them. So it's certainly appreciated. Thank you.
It is, as I mentioned, Wednesday, ever changing.
Yeah.
We met Wednesday, had a commissioner's call Thursday, and we knew a commissioner's call was scheduled Friday at 1 o'clock, and TEA provided a press release at 10:45 a.m., of which superintendents and school personnel received the same time as the general public, which creates just a lot of quick reaction and questions when you really haven't even had time to go through and read and process the new direction. So when we say ever changing, that is truly the case. And I think that's what makes this such a challenge, is that your circumstances can change so quickly on you. And we want to be able to make the best decision, have as much information as possible, do right by our community. And there will be times where we say, we're not sure, we need to check, or the answer as of right now is this. So a lot of people have worked very hard to pull together that information, build the website, so there's a place for people to go find that information. The health department reviews that protocol for us too, and provides us feedback if there's anything we need to adjust. And I can't tip my hat to them enough either for the support and guidance they've provided us, as well as a number of people on the administrative team and the countless hours of pulling all this together. As you can see, there's lots of thought and process put together in all of this, as you could see in Ms. Perry's presentation a few moments ago. So a lot of work by a lot of folks, and we'll continue to do so and plan accordingly to move forward.
And I just want to say, yes to everything that Ms. Green said and Ms. McAdams. I agree with all of that wholeheartedly. I think that we've had great leadership, and I know that things are changing constantly for you guys. But there are a couple things that I want to say, and this is I say this out loud because I have to constantly tell myself this. There are 4 things that I try to keep in mind. And, one of those is to remember to talk to my kids about the changes, that school's going to look a little bit different this year. And I mean, as we saw through the schedule that they put up for us. So I think it's important to talk to our kids about what it's going to look like. I don't want them to be fearful, but just to understand. And then stay positive. I have to keep reminding myself to stay positive and to look for the opportunity that all of this is presenting to us. And then adaptability. I said it last Wednesday, but I think for everybody, parents, families, students, teachers, we've got to remember to be adaptable this year. And then also finally, support for our teachers and staff and administrators. I think just asking our teachers, hey, is there something little I can do to help you out this year? It might be something simple, like they might just say, if you could just pack the lunches kind of like this, little things like that. So I think, and again, this is stuff that I have to keep telling myself as well, which is why I'm saying it out loud here tonight, just to remember to support our teachers because they're going through all of this just like all of us. So I'll step off my soapbox. But thank you.
Any further comments? You and your staff are definitely doing an outstanding job. At this point, we will move to item I1. Consider approval of new administrator contracts as recommended by the superintendent of schools. Mr. Martindale.
I was thinking back, and we've had some administrative contracts for maybe central office positions and those types of things. But at the campus level, over the course of this summer, I'm trying to remember if maybe this is the first one. So we are come to you recommending the hiring of Matthew Picard as assistant principal at College Station High School. Matthew has 5 years administrative experience as an assistant principal at the middle school level. He'll be joining us from Bryan ISD. Matthew has 2 students in our school district now, 2 young men, one at Welborn and one at Pecan Trail. So went through the process, and Ms. Parkerson and her folks were very impressed with Matthew, so we come forward recommending him for an administrative contract to serve as assistant principal at College Station High School. That vacancy came from a retirement.
You want a motion? I would love to make a motion to approve the new administrative contract for assistant principal at College Station High School to Mr. Matthew Picard.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Nugent, a second by Ms. Nolan. At this point, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
And congratulations to Mr. Picard. I know he is watching it on the live stream. He's not here with us, but I know he's watching on the live stream. So welcome to the team.
He hopefully will make a comment or gesture that
He
he's
did a
in there
light.
so he doesn't get in
Yeah.
timeout. We will move to item J1 under business. Consideration and discussion related to the 2020-21 budget and compensation plan. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Ms. Strauss, our Chief Financial Officer, is going to walk us through our latest budget projections as well as a draft compensation plan for the board to review and ask questions on. Again, this is not an action item. She's sharing where we are as far as the budget and a possible compensation plan. Pending those questions and whatever adjustments from feedback tonight, then we would come back to the board at a later date for asking for approval on a recommended compensation plan for 2021. So with that, Ms. Strauss?
Thank you, Mr. Martindale. I appreciate it. And good evening. First of all, I can't believe this is probably the third time I've presented some budget information to you. So I tried not to duplicate things that you've had before, even prior to me presenting. You've seen it a number of times. So please ask questions if there's something missing and you've seen before. A few things that we're going to go over tonight is a proposed compensation plan. You've had some parameters previously of what our priorities would be. We're going to look at revenue and expense projections again for both the general fund and the debt service fund, and then some other information, timeline, next steps, and that sort of thing. So jumping right into the compensation recommendations, looking at the teacher salary, if you'll recall, following the advice of Texas Association of School Boards, their HR section of that, we're going to focus on the beginning teacher salary. That is where the district was low compared to the market that we compete with. So we're looking at increasing the beginning teacher pay from $44,250, its current salary, to $45,500. And we would like to ensure that every eligible reteacher turning would receive at least a $1,000 increase from where their current annual base salary is. That is as they move along the steps in that salary schedule. So with those type things, with the beginning salary going to $45,500, this is what that salary schedule would look like. And you can kind of see, you can look across. So a brand new teacher here, just coming in for her first year of teaching, $44,250. If you look across, they would now go to step one at $45,600. And then, all the way down, you can look at how those are. Now, there are some teachers that are not on the salary schedule because they have more years than 25, of course, and so we would ensure that they got a $1,000 increase, just the same as the other ones on some of these steps. So if you look at that $1,000 increase, even though some might get a little bit more, it is a 1.92% increase of what the midpoint teacher salary is, and that's $52,200. I do realize this is based on a 10-month teacher. That's the majority of our teachers are on a 187-day contract or 10 months. So those who work a longer contract would be adjusted accordingly. Now you recall that we based this on TASB's study that said that we were low. And I think I showed you that top chart at the last meeting that showed at that 0 year, we were in the 90th percentile with our peer groups that we look at. So if the salary schedule that we're proposing is adopted and we went to $45,500, if we compare that to the median we had for 1920, because that's the best information I have, we would have gained 3 percentage points in that market. So I think that's real important to know that we would be gaining ground. Of course, we would reassess that once all of these other peer districts adopt their salary schedule as well. Another piece to our compensation plan is to adjust some of our stipends. And so this is just a summary. Of course, when we do the compensation plan, the entire stipend schedule would be brought to you, but I think it's sometimes easier just to focus or look at the ones that are changing. So this is just a summary of the ones that are changing. Many of them are just increasing what we call the extra days. That would be the days that they are expected and required to work beyond the teacher contract because of the additional duties that they have. So the additional cost for these stipends would be about $92,000 in that category. For our other pay groups, we would be recommending a 1.5% increase of what we call pay grade midpoint, and that is for our administrative and professional groups. A 2% pay grade midpoint for our clerical and paraprofessional, a 2% for our auxiliary, with the exception of bus drivers. We would like to increase the beginning pay for bus drivers from $16 to $16.50. That's again at the recommendation of TASB and looking at our comparison groups. And those comparison groups are more in the local area because that's where we compete for those bus drivers. But they're very hard to keep and retain. So we'd like to kind of close the gap there a little bit. And then those stipend changes that we just went over. So the net cost to the general fund is estimated at a little bit over $1.4 million for this particular plan.
On the bus driver
ma'am.
beginning pay, is that bring us to, are we competitive at that level?
It's still below some of our very local markets that we do. It is what they recommended. They not only recommend with school districts, they're looking at Texas A&M University, Brazos Transit in those areas, but we still will be below our most competitive school district. So.
Okay.
And let me touch on that one. Because Mr. Silva's leadership in Transportation Department and the environment he creates, leadership he provides with his folks, that he sustains, he doesn't have significant turnover due to the lower rate, simply because I think of his leadership and the way he handles people. So there's tremendous value in the environment he creates in that department.
That's definitely significant when you have that retention, right?
It is. I've personally been out there many times, and it's a very nice environment and working environment for the employees. I think that makes a big difference. And now for the budget update, this is not new information, but I think it's worth reemphasizing. We are still budgeting for an average daily increase of 1.75%. That is much lower than the demographer estimated when he was doing his work last year. I think that was at 2.5 to 2.6. Again, the uncertainty of attendance, the virtual school, and just the whole experience this year, we feel like we needed to back off on that and be a little bit more conservative. Property value growth, we've gotten some updates. We've been using zero growth, but it looks like it's going to get closer to that 0.5%. Although I didn't change our revenue forecast because the way the state funding formula works, we're really not going to gain much money as our property taxes increase because of growth. The state revenue declines, so we're not going to be able to pick up much. But we all want to see growth for our community, so that's a good thing. And then the property tax rate, what is proposed, includes the additional penny that the school districts are allowed because you were not taxing at that $1.06 before. We are allowed 1 cent by unanimous vote for our board of trustees. But even with that and the debt rate combined, we feel like we're going to be able to offer our taxpayers about a penny decline in total from where the tax rate is currently. Revenue projections, this again did not change. I do want to emphasize that extra penny is here, and that extra penny, because it is what they call golden pennies, it's in that realm where that penny will bring us more than what it would for just taxes. So that penny brings us about $1.6 million in additional revenues, so it's very important to the budget. And then our expenses, these have changed slightly from the last time because we refined it, compensation plan and a few other numbers. So the net difference is expenses or appropriations exceed revenue by just under $2.7 million. And the detail of the increases or a summary of those increases is at the bottom section where you can see new positions, raises, utilities, and that sort of thing. Now, last time we did talk about some concerns of $2.7 million deficit, and yes, that always concerns me. But I did go back and look at the last 5 years. And the last 5 years, there has been an original budget that was adopted at a deficit. But each of those years, that deficit did not materialize when we got to the final financial statements. And so fund balance has grown, so that's a good thing. So I just wanted to provide that history for you. And the biggest year there and the difference was this past year, August 31, 2019. And there was two extraordinary items that really happened late in the budget year that we had no idea was going to happen. One is a federal program called SHARS that has pretty large revenue, what we call a settle up. And they're about 18 months to 2 years behind in that settle up. They're trying to do some catch ups, and we got 2 years of that all at once. And then College Station ISD benefited from what they call hurricane relief funds. And that was a federal and state program of about $2.9 million that came in August, the last month of our year. So those two things hit that we were not expecting.
And all this time, I thought it was our chief financial officer.
Well, that too.
It was.
That had a lot to come.
I'm paying back all my luck now. Superintendent COVID. The $1.5 million was a second settle up for the year that is again them resetting the payment schedule, and I believe that occurred around April or May, March, April.
It was late in the fiscal year, somewhere around that time.
And the 2.9, yes, we got state revenue relief from Hurricane Harvey.
Yes.
Correct? Mm-hmm. And that was because our property values didn't grow as much as the comptroller had projected based on historical. So our property value growth slowed down. So obviously that was due to Hurricane Harvey. So we got an additional settle up from the state for 2.9, and we received that late July, first week of August as we're closing out a year. So there's was significant revenue that you cannot project.
It's better to have revenue you didn't
Absolutely. I prefer it that way. Absolutely.
We hope that trend continues. Right? The positions new positions that were included in the budget are detailed out here. Special education is 4 of those with 3 teachers and 1 instructional aide. As career and technology ag teacher, and again, this particular program, if the students materialize the way the master schedule showed, this will pay for itself in additional weighted funding. 9 custodians and a paraprofessional in HR, a human resource associate. Debt service, this is still a major part of the budget adoption. Nothing has changed here, but I think it's worth looking at again. And we're going to talk about one of those items in just a minute. But again, a current tax rate of 0.269. We feel like we can do the scheduled payments plus the refunding and early redemption that we're going to ask for approval for in a little bit, and still lower this by about a half a cent, plus the net reduction after compression on the maintenance and operations. Both of these will combine to give the taxpayers about a penny relief. Next steps, we're going to continue to follow property values. Those should be coming in, our certified values, in the next 10 days. TEA is still making changes, so this one hasn't, still looking at additional changes that's going to come through and monitor those, as well as student enrollment. I'll be watching the choices that students and parents select, so I can kind of maybe better judge the total numbers of students. We want to finalize this compensation plan and bring it back to you for approval in the near future. And we are already preparing for the public hearing and the budget and tax rate adoption that will come at the August board meeting. And last but not least, as soon as we get done, we'll be watching the legislature for the next biennium and changes, because we're anticipating a lot of changes there. This is the 3-year projection that you saw before. It's changed slightly for the 2021 preliminary numbers that were there. But can't put a whole lot of confidence in these because that 21, 22, and 22, 23 is the next biennium, and we know those are changing. This is based on our current funding formula and the tax compression that will continue to happen. So that those losses continue because those adjustments haven't been made. So one thing that, Mr. Martindale said, a majority of this is the increase in staffing and the inflation that we put on raises. And so he asked me to prepare this and take those two factors out. And it does change that loss significantly in those 2 out years. So I just think that that's important to note that, if things do, go negative in that direction for funding, that, we're going to be doing very good watchful expenditures and trying to control that as much as possible.
My point in asking Ms. Strauss to prepare this slide to see the difference is if at some point with the economy it will play itself through the state budget and school funding. So I wanted to show that if that occurs and school funding is tight in the next biennium, that, while we always want to provide our employees with additional compensation and meet needs with additional positions, that worst case scenario, there's capacity to manage if things go really bad from the state level and state funding. There are ways to attempt to manage that and keep us in a manageable place. So that's why I asked her to show those particular numbers. So once you add the payroll, obviously that cost is there and it accrues over every year. So that's why I asked her to show those without increasing compensation and adding positions. Not that that's a year away, but just to show that if we have to weather the storm, that we could.
Okay. Questions or comments?
That was a very interesting slide, though. I'm glad you put that in there.
I think the historical context was so important, so I appreciate that.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Yeah, question, I guess, because I did love the discussion that we had last Wednesday between the two of the important competing factors here, right? Do we give money to our teachers, which I think not only I have heard that from teachers that we need to do, but when you show us the data, to me, it seems very clear that we are behind, our competitors on some of those amounts. So, I mean, me personally, I think particularly with those teacher compensation numbers, I think that's important to me that we do that. But the other side of it is to watch the fund balance. Could you tell us what is the percentage that it's recommended that we keep a fund balance, and what does that calculate out for us today?
And I apologize, I have not calculated ours, but they usually look at 3 to 4 months of operating expenses. And you should also have a policy in here that says what your acceptable levels is as a board. So I'll take a look at that. But usually it's anywhere from 3 to 4 months of operating expenses.
So about 30%.
Yeah, a third of, yeah, right.
So you get 30% of your operating budget is where we go. And first rating uses 60 days, 90 days.
90 days.
90 days, 3 months.
I think we used to call that the Harris line when he did the.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
The yellow line. The yellow line.
Remind me, Mr.
2011.
Rice, tomorrow, and I will show you the
graph.
Harris.
The Harris line.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. I guess you're not going for, are you?
Right.
J2, consider and act on an order authorizing the issuance of unlimited tax refunding bonds, Series 2020, appointing a pricing officer and delegating to the pricing officer the authority to approve the sale of the bonds, establishing certain parameters for the approval of such matters, levying an annual ad valorem tax for the payment of the bonds, and enacting other provisions relating to the subject. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. I'd like to welcome Victor Quiro, our financial advisor. It's been a while, Victor. It's good to see you.
Likewise.
Victor is our financial advisor from Specialized Public Finances, joining us this evening. He's going to speak to J2, an opportunity to refinance some of our debt, and it really goes hand in hand with J3 as well. So Victor and Amy are going to be speaking to us about the opportunity to refinance some of our debt and the possible early redemption of some of our existing debt as well. And it will position, not only save us money, but position us for the future as well. So Victor, again, it's been a while. It's good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. And as always, I know that you always bring good news.
Oh, yes.
So I'm excited.
Well, I try.
Very good.
That's my goal. Honorable President, members of the board, Mr. Martindale, thank you for having me here this evening. It's such an honor and pleasure to be back in front of you. My role as your financial advisor is to help you through the municipal bond issuance process to finance new projects. But we also continuously monitor your debt portfolio in conjunction with what's happening in the municipal bond market with respect to interest rates. And we alert the district when there's opportunities to refinance those bonds for interest cost savings. And so this evening, we're here to actually, this one presentation where we hopefully will take care of the two agenda items that you're considering this evening. The first one would be to allow the administration to move forward on a refinancing opportunity. And then the second one would be an opportunity to potentially utilize some cash on hand or some excess collections that you may have in the near future to pay off some of the bonds and achieve interest cost savings that way. And so the first page after the cover sheet here, this is an index that we use in the industry to see where municipal bonds currently are. And so this is taking a look back in the past 10 years. And so you can see here what most currently is on the far right there. You can see how low interest rates are right now. Right now we're just at completely historically low interest rate environments. I've been to this 20 years, and this is really the lowest that I've seen it. And so a lot of school districts are taking that opportunity to refinance bonds if they can and have the opportunity to. So the next slide here, this is your existing debt as of August 31st, 2020. We did not include some principal payments that you already have scheduled and may have already sent those payments out that will be due on August 15th here in the next month. And so currently the school district has 9 bond issuances outstanding. On the left-hand column, you could see there the name of those issuances there on slide number 2. And then the second column is the purpose of that initial bond. So my industry, for some reason, likes to make things a little harder than what they are, so we use very different jargon. And so the new money means that those bonds were issued for a brand new project. And then the refunding is our way of saying we refinance those bonds for interest cost savings. And so you can see there the purpose of each individual bond of the 9 that you have outstanding currently. The next column there where it says total, that's the principal amount that is outstanding per issue. So for those 9 issuances, currently we have about $305 million that is outstanding. The next column, which is callable, what that means is that those are the amount of bonds for that particular bond issuances where they either will be soon or in the future be eligible to be either refinanced or paid off when that particular date comes about. So whenever we issue long-term bonds, the first 9 to 10 years, what a standard bond feature is for bond investors is that they want to have those bonds what we call call protected, meaning that they don't want us to take those bonds away from them. So it's a very standard feature that's in the municipal bond industry, and that gets us the lowest interest rate possible. So that's very common. The next column there, the final maturity, that's when the final payment will occur for each particular bond issue. The next column is the callable, and so that's the first eligible date per bond issue that's listed there of when we could refinance or pay down those bonds early. The federal government 2 years ago or 3 years ago when they passed the tax reform bill made it a little bit harder for school districts to refinance those bonds a little bit earlier than that call date that's listed and assigned per bond issue. So you could see there that the first 3 there in blue font, And what that means is that those are either currently callable or here shortly they will be callable. The other ones we would have to wait until those call dates are a little bit closer before we could basically touch those, refinance them, or pay them down. The callable coupons, that's basically the interest rate that those bonds and the interest rate ranges those particular bond issues have. If I could go on here to the next slide, slide number 3. So whenever we look at your entire portfolio, and so we identify the 3 bond issuances that are currently callable, and the principal amount that's callable is $18.7 million. And so that comprises of those first 3 bond issues, the series 2010, 2011, 2012. However, when we analyze those, we determined that only $11,385,000 are producing sufficient enough savings for me to come up here and tell you, you might want to consider refinancing this to be able to generate interest cost savings. The remaining amounts, it just wasn't enough there for me to say that you need to move forward on that refinancing. And so you can see there on the left chart there, the preliminary refunded bonds, those are the bonds that we've identified as refunding candidates. On the right chart there, you can see the projected annual savings based on current market conditions. We could refinance those particular bond payments and hopefully generate interest cost savings of in excess of $450,000. When we look at these refundings, we not only look at the dollar amount, we look at the present value savings ratio that we're generating from that refinancing. In the industry, anything above 3 to 4% in that range is considered a prudent and efficient refinancing to consider moving forward on. And so right now, the present value savings ratio that's being generated by a potential refunding is about 3.7%. So it's well above there. A lot of those bonds in 2011, through 2012, we've refinanced those in the past and have generated in excess of $4 million. So basically, these interest cost savings would be on top of the refunding opportunities that the district and the board has already moved forward on in the past. And so these are basically the remaining ones that are left over for eligible refinancing. So the agenda item that you're considering right now pertaining to the refunding bond order, we're not locking in any interest rates just yet. All you're doing is you're allowing myself and the administration to proceed with the offering documents that will help us get into the bond market, visiting with the rating agency. And then we would, once we're ready and the market is appropriate, we could go into that bond market, lock in the interest rates at that time, and essentially you're just delegating that authority to sign the final documents to Mr. Martindale or Ms. Draws. And so that allows you some flexibility, so we won't have to plan a bond sale around your next regularly scheduled meeting. So that gets you an opportunity to target the market and get into the market when it's most efficient for the district. If for some reason the market goes away by the time the bond documents are ready, this action that you're considering this evening has a shelf life of 6 months. So if we pass that 6-month period and we have not done anything, we would have to come back to you to get your permission again. And so both this document here and the next document and agenda item that you're considering, you're going to see a similar bond amount. It's going to be a maximum for each one of $18.7 million. As I indicated earlier, we're not looking to refinance that full amount. We're potentially looking to refinance about $12 million of that. However, right now, we're not quite making the decision as to how much exactly we're going to either refinance or pay off early under what we call the redemption, which is the next agenda item. What we'd like to do in discussion with Ms. Draws, and I think it's very prudent, is let's wait to see what the certified values come in later this week. Let's see how the school year starts off. And so we're hopefully looking to enter the market in September, October timeframe. Personally, I don't think interest rates are going anywhere. We're in an election year. Typically, they don't move too much before November, and so I think we should be okay. I'm not predicting that's going to happen. I don't know what the interest rates are going to do next week, much less a few months. But I think we're going to be in an okay position to either refinance the bond candidates that we've identified here or to utilize some excess collections in the near future to pay off some of the bonds that you have outstanding and achieve interest cost savings in that fashion. I will be happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot of information and you've already had a lot of information already, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Did a very good job. I think we all like the fact that you're saving us money, not costing us money. I think we're all excited about that.
It's usually good when you're here.
Oh, thank you. I'll come more often then.
Appreciate you looking out for us, right?
Yes.
Giving us these opportunities. Or
Yes, thank
you and
you.
probably Ms. Strauss as well, so thank you.
Yes.
So, Mr. Schaefer, we'd be looking for action on J2. That would approve us, give us the opportunity to pursue the refinancing September or October and delegate that to Ms. Strauss or myself.
I'll try to make a motion to approve the order authorizing the issuance of unlimited tax refunding bonds, Series 2020, appoint Mr. Martindale and Ms. Draw as pricing officers, and delegate to them the authority to approve the sale within the specified parameters.
That's very good,
right.
Mr. Mann.
As presented,
As presented, you did an excellent job.
there's a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Hardwick has second. We'll call a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Interesting part. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We will now move to J3, consider and act on an order authorizing redemption of outstanding bonds of the College Station Independent School District.
Yes, sir. So this is the last slide here that will cover this agenda item. So redemption is just means we're going to pay off the bonds ahead of schedule. So this last slide here, it's color coded. The 3 bond candidates that we've identified for refinancing or redemption, you can see here they're color coded. These are the principal amounts that will be due on these particular years. So you can see there the blue, I believe. Sorry, my eyesight's pretty bad. The blue is Series 2010. The red is the Series 2011. The Series 2012 is in the green. And so the candidates that we're looking not to refinance potentially are the ones in the blue that are due in 2031 and 2032. We hopefully would use those to redeem those with either excess collections or cash on hand and achieve savings that way. And again, this agenda item and the legal documents that are in front of you also have the same maximum bond amount of $18.7 million that we could utilize to redeem or pay off bonds early.
This would be an action item, and I see Ms. Green moving towards the microphone.
I will make a motion to authorize the redemption of outstanding bonds as presented.
I'll second.
A motion by Ms. Green, a second by Ms. Nolan. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Victor. Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very much for having us, and we'll get to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. No pressure now
Yes.
that we've talked about how you save us money every time you're here. Just
Yeah.
you've set the table.
Yeah,
so
hopefully
know
you'll see
that.
me soon. We'll see.
Right.
Thank you.
That will move us to, if I'm correct, L1.
Correct.
Pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Section 551.0821, hearing on a Level 3 parent complaint, and if necessary, consultation with legal counsel via telephone pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Section 551.071 and 551.129. We will move into executive session and return. It is 12:22 a.m. Wednesday, July 22nd, and I call our meeting back into order.
Mr. President, at 12:22 a.m. and the amount of time that the board has spent discussing this issue, this is probably not what anybody wants to hear. But to thoroughly handle the issue on this particular agenda item, I would move that we abate this agenda item until our next regular meeting.
I'll second.
I got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. The meeting is adjourned.